this is my self-evaluation for my informative speech. I've got the template pulled up here, so that's why I'm kind of looking over. Start off with my introduction. I think my attention getter was effective. I think overall, like, the problem with my speech was my delivery of it. I think the actual content was really well. I think I did a good job at, like, laying everything out. But yeah, I think I was kind of monotone, I guess, in my intro, in my opening, and I didn't really like fluctuate my speed at all. I was very just kind of flat, I think my reason to listen was effective. I feel like one of the things I did succeed at with this speech was kind of demonstrating my passion for the subject. I think I did a good job at portraying how passionate I was about the topic and how much it meant to me, and that I was invested in it. The specific purpose, I'm sorry, the specific purpose wasn't really too tied to my actual presentation. I say that I wanted to talk about how he left a mark on the world, and his mark on the animation industry. And I feel like in my third point I wanted to do that a bit more. Granted, I was restricted on time a little bit. I thought I had longer, and that's on me. I had planned on it being like a 10-minute speech rather than like 7 minutes. But I think that struggled a little bit. I thought I would have more time to describe things. The credibility statement, again, talking about like why you should listen to me, I think was strong. And the preview of the main points I had listed was donning the cowl, which I think, talking about how he got the role, I think was clear. Living two lives, and beyond the bat. My first main point, donning the cowl, was about his life before the role and how he kind of got the role. And I feel like that section was pretty well done. There was some information I had to skip over to stay around our time limit, but I feel the information I gave a good insight to who he was and what was in his mind going into the role. The second point, about living two lives, about his history as a closeted gay actor and how that kind of affected his professional career, I really wish I got to go more in depth about. I think that it was probably where my speech lacked the most, because there was a lot of good information there and a lot of really emotional, like deep information, I guess. But again, I think I got in my head a little bit about the time limit, and I ended up rushing through that section and not really giving the information the time it needed to breathe and kind of resonate with the audience. Especially towards the end of that section, I talk very briefly about how his brother suffered from schizophrenia and his father had undiagnosed mental illnesses, and his home life was very rough. And that was a big part of the story he wrote about himself in the DC Pride comic last year. But because I got so in my head about the time limit, I just kind of brushed over it, and I feel like that deserved more time to kind of be focused on. The third main point was the impact he left, and a majority of this time was taken up by the personal story that I spoke about meeting him at GalaxyCon 2 years ago, and the impact he had on other actors with Mark Hamill retiring and things like that. I think all the points were, I think they were precise and they were parallel. I gave all the information that I thought was most critical, and I believe that all three of them are genuinely equally important. They all kind of impact his performance in the same way, if that makes sense. For sufficient development, again, I think my second point, which was one that I was heavily invested in, got cut short, and that's on me. I wish I had talked more about it and kind of dedicated more time to that section. And for the logical relation, I mean, they are all tied together. They're all about him and his life, and that's really what the core of the speech is celebrating his life. For ethos, I believe I was credible, just like I said with my attention getter, my reason to listen, that I'm very passionate about the subject, and I think that shows throughout the whole speech. I tried to, smile and laugh and kind of keep things lighthearted while even talking about these serious topics. I didn't verbally cite 2 sources for each one, what genuinely, I had the sources, I just hadn't written them all down in my notes for the presentation. So when I got to the point and I said, this is what I'll be focusing on, there's supposed to be 2 things, but I just made a mistake with that. The point about it being kind of like research-based but also conversational, I think I did really well at that. That's kind of one thing that I pride myself on when giving presentations, is that I feel like I give a very kind of calm and friendly aura, I guess. It's this, when I talk, it feels, my goal is to kind of let people feel like they can join the conversation, so I think I did a good job with that. For the conclusion, the brake light, I believe after my third point, I shift from his legacy directly into personal anecdotes, which I think is a good bridge in between talking about like research-based and then bringing it back into that kind of conversational aspect of it. Eye contact was not as good as I thought it would be. I ended up looking at my notes a lot more than I thought I would originally, which was disappointing. On the rewatch, watching my speech back, I realized that I spent a lot of time looking at my notes, which I didn't think would be a problem going into it, so that's something that was really interesting to see. I think I could have varied more in my my pacing with the speech, but again, I got really in my head about the time limit, and I think that ultimately messed me up more than anything, was worrying about the time limit and how I might possibly go over, because my rehearsal for this speech was like 12 or 13 minutes, which is way longer than it needed to be. And then the point about sentences being crafted in real time, I think I did a good job of. I did not, my notes were just the main points. I had like one sentence for each thing, and I would kind of craft those sentences in real time like we were supposed to. So I think I did a good job at that. The vocalized pauses, even now talking to this, I'm still trying to practice that. I think I struggle with a lot. I always have. But I also think I did better than I on the vocalized pauses than I did the first time. I think the pauses were few and far between on this speech compared to my first speech, but it's still definitely something I need to work on. I think my visual aid in my slideshow was very helpful. The whole point of my speech was to introduce people to Kevin Conroy, who's someone they probably know but didn't know that they knew, you know? And so I think putting a face to the name or a face to the character would or did really help kind of forge that connection, that when they see that character, they'll think of him and go, oh yeah, that is the same guy. He's, you know, my dad's cartoons and now my cartoons. And, I think the visual aid really helped show who he was and what he brought to the character. The things I was most pleased with, it seemed like the audience really responded to everything in my speech. I got a lot of smiles and laughs, and then when I got to the serious topics, it seemed like everyone was invested. I actually got some people to get off their phones instead of getting on them, but I was really pleased with that. I was pleased with the actual content of the speech. I felt like I did a good job of presenting all of the important information within the time limit. And I was also happy with my physical language or body language, as in, like, I'm sorry, the kind of hand motions and everything. I felt like I added a lot of emphasis and weight to some of the things I was saying. The things I was least pleased with, the first one, I think I've said them all at this point, but eye contact. I wish I had better eye contact throughout the speech. It's something I'm definitely going to have to work on. I wish I had paced myself a bit more. Going over the time limit isn't nearly as going under the time limit. So I wish I had done a little bit better at that. And I wish I had gone more in depth, which it kind of ties to the time limit thing, but I wish I had gone more in depth about the important information, because there are some things that are more important than others. If I did this again, the only changes I would really make are on my end. I would slow down a little bit and, take some deep breaths and really give myself time to explain all of the information I have and not, glaze over things. But I feel like the actual content of the speech would stay the same. I think I did a good job of laying all of the information out and putting it in an order that kind of kept people entertained while also delving into those serious topics that come with having such a hard life. So I think that's it for my personal evaluation.